Good afternoon, and thank you for joining for this update. I am Lisa Lord. Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor Mottley, and the Minister of Health and Wellness, Lieutenant Colonel the Honorable Jeffrey Bostic, will address the nation. We will go first to Minister Bostic.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and good afternoon, Barbadians. I am happy today to join the Honorable Prime Minister to give you a synopsis as to where we are today in relation to our COVID-19 response. And I will start by giving you a summary of what has transpired over the last 3 months or so to provide a context for some other things that will follow. So I am going to concentrate on the period 19th of March until 18th of June. And I think this will give a good snapshot as to what has happened and as to where we are at this point in time. So that between the period 19th of March and the 18th of April, the Santos Public Health Laboratory would have conducted 13,439 tests, of which 272 persons were positive. From 19th of April to the 18th of May, 15,001 tests, with 191 persons positive. And then from the 19th of May until 18th June, 15,522 tests with 66 positives. So this gives us a total for the last 3 months or so of 43,962 tests with 529 positive cases. In fact, the last date that we recorded double digits on a single day was actually the 5th of May, when we had 14 positive cases. Since then, up to this time, we've had about 6 weeks, just over 6 weeks of single-digit cases on a daily basis. So this would clearly indicate to you that all of our figures have been declining, and this obviously is a good sign for the country. What I would add as well on top of that information is the fact that on the 19th of March, we would have administered about 60,206 first dose AstraZeneca vaccinations in this country, 60,206. But by the 18th of June, the figures are 91,569 first dose, and 65,395 persons are now fully vaccinated. So these statistics, as I said, pave the way for some things that will follow. I must say to you that throughout that period, we've had some challenges as well. Challenges in relation, we've had some secondary schools, private and public, where we've had some positive cases. We've had some issues at the psychiatric hospital where there were positive cases. Some family clusters, 1 or 2 fairly large ones. We had the problem at the QEH with the security staff. And I say this to tell you that in all of these cases, we were able to overcome the challenges because of the good work that was done by the public health officials as well as all other frontline workers in this country, and also the cooperation and collaboration we would have received from the average Barbadian, and we thank you all for this. I now move to the question of variants of concern, because this is an important discussion. And you would have recalled that several weeks ago, we would have informed the country of the presence of the Alpha or B117 variant in the country. This was from tests that were submitted to CARFA from late last year, so that variant was here from then. And we've had subsequent samples that more or less indicated the same thing, that we still had a few of those cases with Alpha variant here in Barbados. Within recent weeks, though, we've been doing some additional work. And why? Because after the experience of the earlier part of the year and observing what has been happening throughout the globe with all of the variants of concern, the Ministry of Health and Wellness embarked on the project, not only to follow carefully what was happening, but also to strategize as to how we would respond if we had any of those other variants in country, or what measures we would put in place in order to prevent, if we could at all, those variants from arriving. And I am going to report to you today that we have subsequently submitted some samples to CARFA, and 3 positive cases of the Delta variant, B16172, have been identified, 3 cases. 2 of those positive cases, a father and an 8-year-old son who arrived in country on the 21st of April. They were placed straight into quarantine at a designated quarantine hotel from there, and then we would have sent, they were tested positive on the 25th, having arrived on the 21st. Those samples would have been sent to CARFA, and we would have received information that they were positive for the Delta variant on the 11th of June. The other confirmed Delta variant case is a person who arrived on the 14th of May, tested positive on the 24th of May. And let me say something here about that gap. This person arrived as part of a group, and a member of the group had tested positive at an earlier time, which extended the quarantine period for this particular person, so that the 1st of June we would have sent samples to CARFA, and we would have been notified officially on the 16th of June of the variant, the Delta variant here in this case. Once again, this person went from airport straight to a designated quarantine hotel, and from a quarantine hotel straight to isolation at Harrison Point. And the final case is a case of the Gamma or P1 variant, person arriving on the 17th of May, testing positive on the 22nd. The sample went off on the 1st of June and confirmed on the 16th of June. All 4 persons who tested positive for these 2 variants of concern have subsequently been discharged from the isolation facility at Harrison Point. And I want to state here clearly that there are no identified cases of any of these other variants other than the Alpha variant within the local community. And that is important because what this demonstrates is that the measures that were put in place, particularly our entry protocols, have worked well for us. And I want to give credit to all those persons who were associated with that. From the time these persons tested positive, aggressive contact tracing started, and we were able to complete that without any additional positives at that time. And I also want to compliment the designated hotels as well, because when we investigated the situation at those hotels, we were very happy that all of the protocols were followed, and the testing that resulted from this case clearly supported our view at that time. So, I repeat, there have been 4 persons testing positive for 2 variants of concern. All 4 have been discharged from the Harrison Point facility, and there was no local transmission of those variants. So in general, let me say that we have submitted a number of samples to CARFA over time. Some of those samples would have indicated what we already knew of the presence of the Alpha variant, and obviously, as I indicated just now, we now have a couple other variants here, or had, because they've been since released from Harrison Point, and there's no local transmission. We also sent about 12 samples to Canada because we have an agreement with a lab in Canada, which we are really grateful for. And we are about to send another 88 samples to that lab for testing. And recently we've been offered by the UK government through the British High Commission. They've offered to assist us regularly with testing and sequencing in the United Kingdom. And that is something that we have accepted with both arms. and open arms, and we will be pursuing those arrangements shortly to make sure that we benefit from that offer. And finally, in this regard, I'm thankful that PAHO was able to provide us with some primers for the testing of all variants of concern. And we were able to do some testing. The primers will give you like the first part of the test so that you have an idea as to whether or not the sample is positive. And we've used that for the alpha variant, and that one was successful for us. But then we've had to send some of the equipment abroad to be recalibrated to give us then that flexibility to be able to test for all other variants. And we are waiting the return of that equipment, which is due shortly, so that we can begin that testing as well. Furthermore, the government of Barbados took a decision, and a very wise decision, in my view, to provide all of the resources necessary for the Santos Public Health Laboratory to be able to go to another level so that we can do our own genomic sequencing and testing here in Barbados. And this process has commenced. We are now looking at purchasing equipment and so on. In fact, some of the orders have gone off for the equipment to arrive here in Barbados, and that will be an addition and a welcome addition to the arsenal that we have in fighting COVID. So generally speaking, we've been doing quite well. We've been doing quite well, and that is because of the collective effort of all persons concerned. And so the Ministry of Health, the way we look at things from a public health perspective, the public health measures that we implement from time to time, how we adapt those measures or how we lift the restrictions depend a lot on the continuous situational assessment that we conduct. And that assessment is based on the intensity of transmission in the country against the capacity of our country to be able to respond. And we also take into account the social impact on the society and on individuals when we're making these decisions. And so at this point in time, we have recommended to the Cabinet Subcommittee, and that has gone to Cabinet as well, that at this point, given the lower numbers, and I've indicated to you how low the numbers are, the positivity rate is about 0.2% at this point in time, and we've gone down now to 4 per 100,000 population for new cases, so we are doing quite well. And so the energy that has been sucked out of the virus, some of the energy that has been sucked out of the virus, now we believe that this energy needs to be channeled into economic and social activity to allow the country to catch itself and to allow people to be able to breathe a lot easier so that we can get back to a state of normalcy as far as possible. And that is where we are at this point in time. So I'll now hand back over to you, Lisa, and hopefully this will pave the way for the Prime Minister to make her remarks. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister Bostic. And the Prime Minister will now address the nation.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And Minister Bostic, let me start this address by first and foremost thanking all of the healthcare workers and all of your staff in the Ministry of Health, and thanking you for your leadership. But I want also to thank all Barbadians for allowing us to be at this point today. This has not been an easy journey, but it is one that we are only here today because every single Barbadian who felt that they could make a difference and could alter their behavior have done so and allowed the country to be able to reflect these extremely better numbers in terms of our improvement. And the fact that in the last period of time from the 19th of March to the 18th of June over this quarter, that we have been able to see a consistent reduction in cases month by month by month is a matter of total pride for me as leader of this nation. I want to say that we, from the very beginning, told you about the principle of accelerator and brakes. And it is still the same principle that is guiding us. I want to remind us that I also indicated and shared what the government's approach would be, that we would be quick to shut and slow to open, not because of anything other than this is the science that has worked for us throughout. The bottom line, therefore, is that having put us in a position to thank you, and Jeffrey, I thank you truly, then by all means we need now to act and to continue the process of allowing Barbadians to be able to have greater freedoms and greater activities without necessarily at all abandoning the kind of vigilance that we need. We still have to be vigilant, and we still have to recognize that even though we've seen appreciable progress locally, that the world is still fighting this, and that we are likely to have COVID with us, quite frankly, at least for another 18 months, if not for years or decades. And that is largely because until the world has the capacity to produce sufficient vaccines, then it is obviously going to be in a race against the mutations and the variants. Thus far, the vaccines that are available are proven effective to all of the variants, and therefore much of the fear that existed 2-3 months ago has been mitigated by reason of the evidence that shows some levels of efficacy against those variants. Jeffrey has indicated that we have had examples, but in every instance our protocols allowed us to catch it early and to ensure that there was no community transmission of what was there. It is at this point that the Ministry of Health said to us, and we've taken heart, that we are not going to cause Barbadians to continue to bear the same level of restrictions as if our numbers were high again. And therefore, as I've said over and over, where persons respond and we have success, then it is ours to share that success with the people of this nation. And what does that mean in real terms today? That we have economic activity that has to be resumed, that it has been a difficult period, and that we anticipate that as we continue to open up, still gradually, but we open up more and more and more, that we will see greater economic activity, greater jobs, greater capital works coming back to the benefit of all in this nation. It is against that background, therefore, that we have reflected and met, and the current protocols finish on the 29th of June. Accordingly, as of the 30th of June, the government of Barbados will be removing the curfew from the landscape of this nation for the period of time that we continue to improve. Hopefully we will never have to see it again, but that is up to all of us, because I can't promise you that we will not apply brakes if we have problems. But on the current trajectory of the last 90 days, we anticipate that as long as we continue to behave as we've been behaving, then there would be no reason for us to reintroduce it. Secondly, that we will also we've recognized that we have to have some greater economic activity available to our people. Our tourism numbers have dropped significantly, and we accept that. And we've accepted that that has been one of the consequences of what has happened thus far. But there have been implications for farmers, for merchants, not just for the hotel workers or the tourism attractions. There have been implications for truck drivers, all kinds of people, because there's effectively a contraction of demand, because as you've heard me say over and over, we were accustomed receiving over 60,000 visitors long stay a month, and we were accustomed getting 100,000 cruise ship visitors for 8 months of the 12 months of the year. And therefore, when you remove that significant number of people, 1.5 million people roughly, from purchasing on island, it means that it is not just the hotels or the tourism attractions that are affected, but in truth and in fact, from the farmers to the truck drivers to the retailers to a whole host of people who depend on that additional business, to put it in simple terms, in order to make a living in this country. We have seen a slight increase in the number of flights, and we're going to continue to see that. Obviously, our fourth quarter bookings are looking great, and the issue is how do we increase the level of activity between now and the fourth quarter to ensure that as many Barbadians can benefit while not putting the country at risk at all. How do we continue to do our business safely as we have been doing as a nation for the last 3 months? And to that extent, therefore, the government has recognized that we are also today better because, as Minister Bostic pointed out, 91,569 people have had their first vaccination, and 65,395 people have had double vaccinations, making them fully protected from it. That makes a significant difference. We are not at herd immunity. Indeed, the 65,395, I think, is approximately what? Just under a third of the adult population. And the 26 additional thousand people that will have their second vaccination soon will carry us to just over 41% when they're completed. We're still awaiting the mass order that we were expecting, and we are in the business now of trying to locate vaccinations as well for our children, 12 to 18, recognizing that we would like, as far as possible, to get that, if possible, before the September school term starts back. I'm sharing these things with you because I want as much today now to provide certainty and a course for you to be able to plan out your business as far as possible. As a result, not only will there therefore be a lifting of the curfew from the 30th of June, which effectively means the next day, which is the Thursday, but we will also have a situation where we are taking a chance, and I think Minister King would have adverted to it earlier in the week in the press as a result of meetings that we had with the promoters and the entertainers, that we are going to take a chance with respect to certain types of activities. It is not practical nor possible for us to have our traditional crop over event. It isn't. We haven't prepared, and we don't have sufficient time to do it properly. Band leaders and costume designers take time. As you know, all like now, they would be deep into production if we were having crop over in the traditional way. We're not yet ready or comfortable for mass-based events like a carnival. But we do feel that the time has come for us to open up to persons who want to free up a bit and who want the opportunity to take a little backseat from the tension of the last 6 months. And we all know that July is a month that we would normally associate with taking that little relief middle of the year. So without the formal crop over, we are going to therefore allow promoters and stages of events to have parties, lines, whatever you want to call them, that are focused on people, that are limited to 150 persons in any one location. It doesn't mean that that promoter can't have multiple sites of 150, because we live in a world where the technology now allows us to do all kinds of things and all kinds of innovations, and therefore you may find a single promoter beaming or streaming to 3, 4, 5 events at 150. At the same time, we have agreed that they will work through the National Cultural Foundation and the Ministry of Health with Mr. Chapman's COVID monitoring unit, obviously indicating the conditions. We also agreed that they would submit, and they have done so, a list of venues, and the government will provide some levels of support to them, while at the same time providing to band leaders, because we're conscious that there are some band leaders and events that have literally been hurt very badly as a result of this COVID. So even though there will be no kadooment, we have put in place mechanisms to be able to support the band leaders. If you are carrying, you would normally carry 2 bands, one for junior kadooment and one for adult kadooment, real kadooment. Then we will give you $10,000 if you are accustomed to carrying 2, and if you are, there's a man who has a greater exuberance for speeding than the law allows. And when you are carrying and staging only one event in either junior or adult kadooment, the sum will be $7,500. With respect to the Calypsonians and the tents, there are some people who want to have tents, and there are many Bajans I know who would like to stay home and have tents. And I've said to my colleagues, the beauty of a tent is that you learn to laugh yourself. So I look forward to some tents. And as a result, the National Cultural Foundation will be providing support, both not just of $5,000 to each of the tents, but we will be underwriting the cost of streaming along with CBC to be able to bring those tents to the people of Barbados so that we can have a little enjoyment and a little fun as compared to what has been the lonely period of the last 6 months. For the promoters and for the ones who are more interested in the party type events, they too will receive $5,000, but we will also help them with some of the infrastructural costs. And why? Because it is in our interest to be able to ensure that as many of the venues are those that are capable of being monitored and approved effectively by the Ministry of Health. We want these numbers to stay where they are. The conditions that we have put in place for those events of 150 is that persons either are fully vaccinated, meaning 14 days or more with double vaccination, if it is a double vaccination course. I think the only one that is not double vaccination thus far is Johnson & Johnson. We haven't been deploying that locally, but that doesn't mean that Bajans haven't gotten it overseas. So we have to be ready for that. So whatever is the full dose, 14 days thereafter, or because we are not having an exclusionary framework for Bajans who have not been vaccinated, or that you have taken a PCR test within 48 hours of coming to the event. What does that mean in real terms? That some people probably going to go and get the PCR test on a Friday morning if they want to go out Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, for those who have not taken the vaccinations. We hope that we can persuade as many Bajans to take the vaccinations, as I said, as possible, because at the end of the day, if we get herd immunity, even these restrictions that we are still maintaining can effectively be released at that point. The second major thing is that we want to be able to create a bubble for some level of travel from those countries that really and truly present no major risk to us. And we're doing this of our own initiative, but we anticipate that some people will probably reciprocate. We had a bubble before, but it was a bubble for all passengers. We're now saying that we are prepared to introduce a bubble for vaccinated passengers for those countries within the Caribbean that meet our criteria that is determined both, and the Ministry of Health's criteria reflects: one, whether the country is deemed low risk by the automated shape country risk assessment tool, and whether it has been designated not to be at the community transmission phase according to the WHO. And against that background, it therefore means that immediately from the 30th of June, when we introduce this bubble, persons who are fully vaccinated can come to Barbados with a negative PCR test, and we will not have to test you at the airport because of the criteria that the Ministry of Health has used to determine that the risk is absolutely low. And let me give you an example. A country like Dominica has had little or no cases. A country like Anguilla and Montserrat, the same thing. Grenada has been able to control itself as well, fairly well, and the issue therefore, based on the criteria and the green and red that I have before me, we will be able to ensure that vaccinated, fully vaccinated persons with a negative PCR test coming from Grenada, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Anguilla, Montserrat, BVI, Turks and Caicos, Cayman Islands, and Bermuda can immediately enter without a further test on arrival. We are conscious that our brothers and sisters in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Lucia are not yet quite at that point. And indeed, prior to holding this press conference, I spoke to my brother, Prime Minister Gonzalez from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we are hoping to have bilateral discussions over the course of the next week to 2 weeks to see how best we can collaborate on testing, on vaccinations, recognizing also that in the Grenadines, there is a lot of movement daily between Barbados and the Grenadines, and that they've effectively not had any issues in the Grenadines. So we would want to add the Grenadines to this pool, but we need to have the further discussions this week with Prime Minister Gonzalez, and ultimately then also the mainland in St. Vincent. Similarly, St. Lucia. So, my friends, we know that the criteria does not admit immediately of Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Belize, Bahamas, but guess what? they're subject to the same protocols that would have existed before. So if their vaccinated persons come with a negative PCR, they'll land at our airport. They'll have to have the second PCR test as all other vaccinated persons do now, and then they'll be free to come in to the country. If they're unvaccinated, we know the drill. Is a longer period. I think it's 5 days before they have the PCR test in the quarantine, so that there are still the layers of protection against the layers of risk that we face. And I hope that the public is understanding exactly what I'm saying. And if they aren't, or they need further clarification, the Ministry of Health and myself will ensure that as days go by, we will be able and be in a position to do that. To repeat, therefore, we are establishing a bubble for vaccinated persons coming from countries that have been deemed very low risk by the Ministry of Health. And those countries, again, are Grenada, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Anguilla, Montserrat, BVI, Turks and Caicos, Cayman Islands, and Bermuda. We hope that in the near future that we can add, as I said, after the bilateral discussions and looking at how we can help those countries, because there is a lot of movement between two of our closest neighbors, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Lucia. And we hope as well that those in Bonaire, St. Eustatius and Saba, St. Martin, that we will also see some level of movement there soon, because I think some of the data is not as clear as we would like. And I didn't want to hold up the announcement of this or indeed this press conference today, because Barbadians really do deserve some good news after what we had 2 days ago. And I think all of us will agree that this is welcome. In addition to the bubble, and in addition to the recreational activities that are entertainment driven, I am aware that the pleasure cruises feel aggrieved, and we have agreed that those pleasure cruises, we do not have the capacity to monitor you out when you sail for those large numbers. And therefore we are going to agree that if you want to stay in harbour and you want to be treated as a floating restaurant or a floating bar, that you will be subject to the same protocols as those that are on terra firma on land are subject to by the COVID monitoring unit, and you will therefore be able to operate under that. Those discussions, however, should formally take place, but with the guidance that I've given this afternoon, that we are prepared for you to resume business. It just means that you won't be sailing out to the ocean largely because we can't monitor and we don't have the capacity to monitor. The last major area that I want to deal with respect to opening up some more is spectators at sporting events. Because it is unnatural that if people are going to go to a party and 150, that we should start discussing with the national sporting organizations how we will have patrons and spectators be involved in the activities again. We do not feel that we are in a position to do this unilaterally, and therefore those conversations will take place between the Ministry of Sports, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Culture, over the course of the next 2 weeks. But we are setting a date of July 16th to be able to have the resumption of spectators in sports, be it football or cricket or netball or road tennis or whatever. And therefore we want to have those discussions with the relevant sporting agencies so that they're all in place by July 16th. We are aware that the Turf Club held races yesterday, but once again with no spectators. And we are aware that it went off well. Why are we taking this gradual approach? Because in many instances, when we don't do something for a little while, we get rusty. If I don't exercise for a little while, in fact, the last few weeks I haven't been able to exercise, regrettably. And I can feel the difference. So when I go to exercise again, what's going to happen? I can feel as though I need to be able to have a few days or a few weeks doing it to get back where I need to get back. We are no different with the reopening of our borders and with the reopening of activities. And all we've tried to do, and especially even at the airport where we're taking people, or at the cruise thing where we've just been taking one cruise ship a week so far, these things matter. And we need to be able to have practice to make it perfect. And I think you understand what I'm saying. So, and truthfully, the 30th of June represents 6 months since the 31st of December, when we first had to take this action. So we know that Barbadians really have played their role over the course of the last 6 months. We know that we're likely to be in this for the long haul, and therefore it means balancing lives and livelihoods better. And we know, therefore, that these steps are inevitable if we are going to ensure that we don't have a problem with people who can't get their chronic NCDs addressed appropriately because there's a disproportionate concentration on COVID, or people who are not yet working because they're waiting on people and projects to start back, such that you can get a job. And we have, thankfully, a number of capital projects that have either started or are about to start. And as we go forward, Bajans will see more and more construction activity going on. Similarly, there are projects with digitization. We've been able to do that and to get that to the point where we should be hiring persons soon with respect to the digitization. And we are looking generally at some level of confidence returning, so that those of you in the private sector who have put things on pause, we say come forward now. Now is the time to come forward. Now is the time to have discussions with us. We are focused now on returning growth to our country. Last year we lost $2 billion in economic activity, roughly about 17.6% economic decline. And let me repeat it for the country again. There are other tourism economies that did far worse than us, 25% Aruba, 30% St. Lucia and St. Kitts, 19%, Maldives, 32%. In fact, the only countries in the world that did worse than tourism and travel-dependent countries in 2020 are the war-torn countries. And that should tell us all that we need to know. So we are singularly focused on being able to get economic activity both domestically as well as with respect to people with whom we trade or people to whom we open our borders, but without taking foolish chances. The Ministry of Health is maintaining that the persons coming from South Africa or Brazil or India will still be subject to an extended period of quarantine. And for that, we're grateful to be able to have that still in place, because it sends the message that even though we accept that there has to be new things, that reality is that we have keep balance. We are going to allow persons to resume training of drivers. Jeffrey, thank you for reminding me, learning under learning permits on Sundays as well, because we are aware that a lot of the persons who would normally do this would do this on a Sunday, and there's no public policy or public health reason why that should not resume at this point in time. I was making the point about the economic activity largely because I think that we all know that it is the duty now of every Barbadian to help us grow this economy. And in doing so, we need to become, as I said, to work to the longer term goals of just doing what we do better and making sure that it is world class. At this point in time, we have to literally close the gap with the loss of revenue. While the government lost $2 billion in economic activity as the country lost it as a whole, the government itself in terms of revenue lost $600 million last year. And I am aware of persons who are agitating for the reduction in fuel taxes, and I'm empathizing with them because I understand why they would want to do so. But let me also explain and contextualize it, because Barbados isn't only made up of persons who drive cars. And one of the things that we did back in 2019 was that we reduced income taxes, and for the first time, persons earning between $2,000 and $2,500, between $1,500 a month and $2,000 a month, were allowed to be able to get a reverse tax credit for the first time of $1,300 a year. And we've been able to carry them. Similarly, persons earning between $2,000 a month, just over $2,000 a month, and under $3,000, between $25,000 and $35,000 a year, you now also don't effectively pay taxes, because when you pay the taxes, we give you back the equivalent of all that you have paid at the end of the year in a compensatory income credit. And at the same time, we are also making sure that persons who are literally taking advantage of the other things that we've put in place in terms of tax reform would tell you that we can't easily go back to a situation where we can therefore reduce the taxes on assets, reduce the taxes on transactions. What I am prepared to tell you as well is that we will cap, and I've just started to discuss it with the Ministry of Finance officials, that we will put a cap on the VAT that we collect going forward, so that if oil prices continue to go beyond a certain point, that we're in a position then to cap the VAT on the taxes there, so that we do not pass it on to ordinary Barbadians. And why? Look, let's talk some straight talk here now. We ain't got no money tree. We ain't got no money tree at all. And the bottom line is that we're still paying for people to go to university. We're still covering everybody's education from pre-primary right to tertiary. We're covering all the access at the hospital and the polyclinics. On top of that, we're covering everything with respect to COVID, as well as the testing. We've said that we must start to charge for tests at the airport for anybody traveling in or out, but the government will continue to pay for tests for Bajans within the country, even for the ones who go into the FETs. And why? Because the average FET requires somebody to sell drinks, somebody to transport the drinks, somebody to be able to work to FET, somebody to clean up after, so that they are generating economic activity. And we feel, however, that if you're prepared to travel, then part of the cost of travel should be the cost of testing, because you're going to have to test up there coming in and otherwise. So against that background, my friends, I'm asking us, please, to bear with us. This is not the kind of situation that we would have wanted. I hear you. I feel your pain. We will cap if oil prices continue to go up, but I beg you to understand our position too. If we continue to remove taxes just so while giving you the benefits, those working for under $2,000 a month, just under $2,000 a month, you're getting the reverse tax credit. It wasn't happening before for people earning between $1,500 and $2,000. You're getting $1,300 a year to offset the increases and the other things that you've paid. Now, there is a paper that will be going to the social partnership that will address the issue of cost. I've sent it back twice for work on it and cost of living. And I anticipate that by early July, we'll be in a position to take that. And why? Because the issue of cost, of course, there is imported inflation. And we all know it. Global commodity prices on everything has increased. But we do feel that there are still ways in which we can ease the burden in part from on Barbadians. We've agreed, for example, for the next 3 months to be able to provide to the poultry sector and those with the feed increases a level of subsidy of $2 million to be able to keep the price of chickens down for as long as we can. But we recognize that at some point, some element of prices will be transferred, even if not the whole thing. Last year, October, the end of October, I said when we put this matter to the social partnership in November, I had said then that we need to be in a position to ensure that if we were accustomed to 15% markups or 18 or 20% markups, then we need to be able to drop it a little bit until we can get back on our feet. And that is the approach that we're taking also with the private sector. We have not ruled out price controls. If necessary, we are prepared to go there, but we also want persons who are dealing with the importation of goods in this country to recognize that they have a responsibility not to layer prices. And if you have import companies that are either substantively or wholly controlled by the importer, then you got to bring that to the table and let me get some transparency around here to ensure that we are not transferring pricing that is artificially building up because you have 2 or 3 importers that are related to the final importer with respect to the goods that are being imported. So this is not a straightforward issue, but the government is very much aware of it, very much sensitive to your plight, but also will say to you that yes, there will be some level of price increases because we don't produce everything that we need. And the bottom line is, we all saw that almost every commodity, wheat gone up, oil gone up, every commodity internationally has gone up. And then we saw that there was an increase in shipping prices, largely because containers could not get back to China and there was a shortage of containers. And that was then compounded by the Suez Canal blockage, which all of us remember, when that boat that literally was blocking the Suez Canal for over a week. With respect then, finally, my friends, so we're going to keep on top of this, and one of the things that have been, one of the good things about COVID, if there was ever a good thing to have, is that it forced us into regular communication as a people and as a nation. And I would like us to keep that up. I really, really, really want us to keep it up. And it is against that background that I want to say to you that when I talked earlier also about us being a little rusty in how we're doing things and we need to test things out before we get it going again, I was referring not just to the parties or to the other areas of economic activity, but also to the airport. Because we've been doing well with the numbers that we're taking, but our fear is that by the time we get to October, November, December, and we're back up to the large numbers that we had before, we need to be doing it like clockwork. So we need to use this opportunity to get Barbados ready. We're bringing people in, but we know it's not going to be a typical August, September, October, but hopefully we believe from November and December going forward, we will see those additional numbers. It means, therefore, that we are re-engineering the process at the airport. For example, we find that there are too many people asking the same questions when we can extract the data at one point and keep it. We were doing it before largely because we were literally diverted with our attention on other things. Now that the pressure has eased up, we can go and refine these things to make them more user-friendly, make Barbados that hospitable environment that we all know that it is, and that we're in a position also, and I've set up a committee to look at coming to the country and finding who are the 10 top hostesses that we would want to be able to have at the airport, helping us to welcome people as we go forward. And to that extent, rather than somebody handpick them or we just do applications, let me do this together, the whole country. And I'm awaiting the subcommittee's report that has been set up specifically for this to tell us and advise us how do we get people. And it's a simple ad. I tell them they can even ask me to do the ad if they want. If you feel that you treat anybody in Barbados better than anybody else could treat them, come forward because we want you as a hostess. And it is that kind of engagement. And let me be very clear. There are some people in this country who feel that you can only welcome people if you speak proper English. That ain't true. That ain't true at all. And we need to begin to understand, when I go to the IMF and the World Bank, 3/4 of the people there can't speak proper English, but they know what they're doing and they're communicating. And we have to break the chains that have held us in the past by refusing to have people involved in certain activities simply because we don't feel that they present well in terms of how to speak English, Jeffrey. And the bottom line is we're passing that corner. And we need to therefore see who has the heart and the warmth, who has the head to be able to deal with these people. You can't have people standing up for 2 hours in the airport and feel that they're going to want to come back to Barbados regularly. These are some of the things, and I feel that by us opening up how we're doing with the hosted, and by us opening up even on the tagline with the committee that we've set up, which is broad-based to be able to reflect who we are as a people, that this is the way forward that is going to help us not simply get back tourists, but hopefully redefine our tourism product, recognizing that we've already assumed global leadership last year with the 12-month welcome stamp and the digital nomads who have come here, recognizing that more and more people want to be able to use that, and therefore the extension of that as not just a 2020 to 21 initiative, but as a permanent feature of Barbados, the Barbados visitor experience. And I don't really like the word tourist, I want to deal with visitors and hospitality. And I've already said to the BTMI as well that we need to focus and have clearly this country needs a director of hospitality and the Ministry of Tourism, not just in the BTMI, because it's about welcoming people. And we are going to do this together, as I know we can. And there are people who want to tell me, oh, you can't think, our Barbadians can respond. I know we can. We have been, Barbadians are some of the most, in fact, let me put it another way. Our hospitality and our commitment to people is endearing, and it's what makes us who we are. And we are with you for the long haul. That's why we have the highest repeat factor visitor on average across the last few decades in the Caribbean. We may not always be the first to jump up under you, but we're going to be there with you for the distance. And when a Bajan is with you, they're going to make you feel warm, and we know how to make people feel different. And I hear it every day about our taxi drivers, about our beach vendors, about our hotel workers, about the people across the country working in stores, etc. Let us do this together, and let us make sure that Barbados can be that place where warmth and hospitality is our second name, and people associate us with it. And we need to start first and foremost, therefore, at the airport and the seaport. It's a more complex environment because before you could have walked in. Obviously now we have public health nurses and port health people up front because that's the first consideration as you enter our borders. And then the customs and immigration obviously will continue to play their role. So, my friends, we've come a long way since the 31st of December. I really, 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 really am proud to lead this nation with a people who understand how to work together and how to pull together. And this last 6 months, that is exactly what we did. Are we where we want to be fully? No, nor is the world. But are we going in the right direction? Very, very much so. And must we continue going in that direction? Absolutely. Will we have a few bumps going forward? Yes, we will. Will we see one or two schools being affected again? As you've heard from Jeffrey, as you've heard from Santia, as you've heard from the unions? Probably. And that's why getting the vaccinations for those kids between 12 and 18 is so critical. But as you know, as I've said before, out there is the wild, wild, wild west when it comes to procuring vaccines. And therefore, we've had to be able to see how best we can do that, particularly since the vaccines that are available for children are more limited. And that process we will continue to update you on. We know that we've delayed the common entrance exam, and we've had to wait because at the end of the day, those kids who have been deprived of regular educational opportunities in this last year, to my mind, are the real losers of COVID, with the exception of those who caught COVID or who died from COVID, obviously. But our children locally and globally, are the ones who have had to make perhaps the biggest long-term adjustment. It is up to us, and I've said it to Santia, for us to use the next 2 years to be able to ensure that we close the gaps in learning for our children who have suffered as a result of the last year, 18 months. And therefore, I look forward to working with the teachers, with the parents, with the schools to ensure that as a government, we can bring our children back into pole position where we know they need to be if we're going to uplift our country and if we're going to meet the target that on the 2nd of January 2020 that I asked you to walk the road to meet with me, that by 2027 we become world class in all that we do. World class in all that we do for each other in Barbados, world class in all that we do as we engage with the outer world. And therefore, my friends, it is my distinct pleasure this afternoon to speak to you in this way. I end as I started, with a heart full of gratitude to the people of this nation, and in particular to our frontline workers. This has not been an easy ride, but we've done it. And therefore, let us make sure that we don't squander the gains of the past, recognizing that we have still to live life and we have still to earn our keep in this world, nationally and individually. And to that extent, we have ourselves come together because, as Thursday showed us, COVID is not the only battle that we have to fight. The climate crisis is real, and we continue, therefore, to have to take care of each other and to adapt and to do all of the things to mitigate the damages. And we will have some conversations with you as a nation over the course of the next few weeks on some things that we're going to change. But as I said, the best thing about COVID is these conversations. Let us keep doing them together because as one nation, the majority of us walking in the same direction, we now know can achieve anything and can move mountains. God bless this nation. God bless you all. Stay on course, stay focused, and don't let us have to go back at all. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Prime Minister. That was Prime Minister, the Honourable Mia Amor Mottley. And earlier we heard from the Minister of Health and Wellness, Lieutenant Colonel the Honourable Jeffrey Bostic. I am Lisa Lord. Good afternoon.